Welcome back to Catholic Hawk 45. I'm Anthony, and today we're going to be talking about action plans for when you firmly resolve to stop committing sin. When you make that act of contrition and confession, how do we actually go about stopping? Well, today we're going to go over some concrete examples of ways that you can turn off the spigot of sin, especially grave sin, by actually having a game plan together. And I'd like for you in the comments section, after you listen to this episode, leave some of your ideas about different types of sins and some strategies that people could use to help them conquer those sins. So I'm just going to basically cover some of the big ones. So the first one would be like sins of the flesh, right? The sins against the 6th and 9th commandment. Now, this can be a real struggle. So first of all, I would say if you're a married man or woman, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is licit to change that temptation. Let's say you're being tempted. Change that temptation in order to think about your wife or your husband and avoid that temptation. Now, I don't think you would want to spend a lot of time thinking about that unless, of course, you are going to be able to engage in that act with your spouse. So that's one option if you're married. But what if you're not married? Well, there's other options. And really, I would say even if you are married, that's not really the best option. I would say the next best option, this is what I like to do. I like to think about Mary holding baby Jesus. So I like to think about that because I think about, well, if I commit that sin, I am going to hurt baby Jesus. I am going to crucify baby Jesus. I will crucify innocence. So I think about that very peaceful image of Our Lady holding our Lord as a little baby with, of course, the wounds as well as a baby. And so that really helps me a lot. Now, I would say the number one thing that helped me with sins of the flesh and beginning to really get over that is considering when that temptation hits, thinking about my place in hell. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, I literally think about being in hell. I think about the sulfur, the heat. I literally think about the demons tearing me apart and how they would do it. Because you have to understand, they hate us. They want us dead. Now, oddly enough, for me personally, this brings me a profound sense of peace because it humbles me. It lets me know, like, this is my future forever if I fall into this sin. And that's my number one go-to. Now, I would say this about sins of the flesh. Be mindful. And this really goes for everything we're going to talk about today. Be mindful that initially when you're trying to implement this game plan, whatever you choose to do, it's not going to necessarily go your way, especially if you've built up a habitual grave sin. But over time, if you let it work, it will happen. For instance, let's say you see some woman or some gentleman out on the street and they're dressed, well, perhaps they wouldn't be a gentleman or ladylike, would they? But they're dressed inappropriately. And that works up that drive in you to procreate as God's plan intended, but with your spouse, right? Or your future spouse. And you might be fighting that. You might be trying to implement this plan, but you fall. You fall into that sin. Try not to dwell. Of course, make a perfect contrition, but try not to dwell on that. Immediately turn back to what you should have done and do that. Do it anyway. Even though you fell, keep practicing. Do it anyway. Just once. Don't do it over and over again. You might get OCD about it. You don't want that. But that way, eventually what happens, and I can attest to this from experience, what happens is eventually that is no longer an issue because you've practiced. Even though you had the fall, you still continued to practice. You made your perfect nutrition, and then you just stop, right? Just practice it once, even after the fall, and then stop, right? Disengage, let it go. A nice thing I like to say to myself that I learned many years ago, if I fall into that situation, is, Jesus, I have done that which is like what I am. Nothing more can be expected by my hands but these and similar transgressions. Please, because of who you are, Lord, forgive me. So that's something you can think about as well. Okay, let's move on to we're going to get to sloth, laziness, and I would say just like gluttony, right? Fat. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, great, he's talking about me. Nope. There's a lot of fat people out there. If you haven't noticed, looking around in the United States, there's a significant portion of the population that is very well fed. So if we truly have a famine soon, I think many will survive off of their lard stores. So I was actually getting fat myself 2 years ago. And I just thought, no, this has to stop. I'm stopping this right now. Now, that was for health reasons and probably also for some vanity reasons. But in any case, it was happening to me. And so first of all, you have to understand the American diet, number one. We have a propensity to overeat because we're constantly eating carbs. And if you're constantly eating carbohydrates like pasta, potatoes, bread, those types of things, and that's your main course, you're always popping up your blood sugar. You're always then hungry later, almost immediately, and you're really wearing your body out as well. So the first thing I would recommend, number one, is you may not have a problem with gluttony. Gluttony itself, and you can correct me again in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but the way I understand gluttony from a Catholic perspective is that you would have to literally eat like in old Roman times, just eat, go to the vomitorium, throw up everything, and then go back to eating, and that's essentially gluttony. Now, that would equate in our age to perhaps, I believe, eating until if you had to get up and go do labor after your meal, if you were to vomit or you just couldn't do it, then you would know, okay, that's gluttony. I went too far there. So a way that you can kind of begin to conquer this is, number one, what I suggested there, to lose weight, just try less carbs, try going towards more like giant salads and different meats. Try and get full that way. Try not to fill up on carbs. You can gradually walk down your carbohydrate intake. You could say, okay, initially if you're a big carb head, the first week I'm going to only have 6 carbs a day. All right, week 2, I'm going to have 5 carbs a day. Week 3, I'm going to have 4 carbs a day. And then you whittle it down to where you have like 2 carbs a day or just 1 carb a day. And you make sure your portions are reasonable or small. Don't get crazy. This will help you a lot because you won't be as hungry anymore. And so you won't have the drive from your own gut to want to overeat. You'll be satiated much easier just with like a really big salad and some meat. That's what I do all the time. The other thing you might consider doing is getting a sugar substitute as well. It's not going to bump your glycemic levels up like crazy. So, stevia is good for that. Swerve is another brand. I'm not endorsing them, not getting paid by them, but I like Swerve because it tastes more like real sugar because it's actually closer to it. So, of course, you want to take down the sweets as well, too. And this does help, actually, because you become less addicted to those things. Now, if you have a true problem with gluttony, then I would suggest what you do is action plan. Every meal, you make sure that you are leaving some food on the plate. And then maybe increase the portion of the food you're leaving on the plate or leave it the same. Just as long as you're not overeating. Just practice it. Even if you're not going to overeat and you're going to clean your plate and make a happy plate. Just practice. Just leave some. And build that up as a habit. And that will help you conquer this issue. As far as laziness or slothfulness, Look, I would say number one, make a list and then do it, right? So actually write down a list and do it. Make time to get organized. Organize your life. Organize everything about your house, your finances, everything. Get yourself organized. And really, I think in today's age, laziness stems from leisure and entertainment mostly. So the big thing, just get off the computer. Get off the phone. Go outside and enjoy life. Go get out in nature. God created this beautiful world and there's so much to do. Get a mountain bike. Get rollerblades. Go play basketball. Find something to do outside. I'm Gen X, so we were in between like the Nintendo and then constantly playing outside. And really we mostly played outside. We didn't play that many video games because there was just so much to do. So try and get out there. It's definitely going to help you conquer laziness if you make a list of things to do and you begin to scratch those off as you complete them, and you're going to get some dopamine hits in your brain from scratching off that to-do list, and it's going to feel good. So that is going to help you continue to really avoid being lazy. So I would say make a list. That's something concrete you can do. Okay, now this is a big one in our day and age. Slander, comedy, gossip. I did a whole video on this and I will post that here very soon, but I just want you to understand. How can you conquer this one? What's the concrete thing you can do? Well, I'm not going to go over all of this, but for a significant portion of that, one of the things that's required by the Catechism of Trent, and really this is, as far as I know, this has never changed, is that you have to go to the person that you were talking about behind their back, whether it was, gossip or comedy or whatever, and you need to make things right. You need to say, hey, I was talking about you behind your back. I'm sorry. Don't share obviously don't share who you were talking with because you don't want to implicate somebody else. And you're just going to have to bite the bullet on that too and just say, hey, I can't tell you. But guess what? You actually go do that so you can avoid hell by making reparation, proper reparation. You don't do it, you might be in trouble. I'm going to put up that episode that I had cut before that really goes over the specifics on this so you can address that. But guess what? You go back to one person, you have to do that, or two people, and you have to do that. Your odds of ever doing that again, very, very slim. If somebody is trying to gossip or slander or calumniate somebody else that or what have you, and they're the one talking, sometimes you just look at them and you don't say anything. And you can kind of shake your head no a little bit too. And hopefully they will get the picture. Or, one thing I like to do is I like to turn the tables on them and I like to start saying positive things about the person they're talking negatively about. That really gets under people's skin. So, those are some options that you have there. Okay, let's see. I would say one of the last things we'll talk about here as we wrap this up is anger. Right? Now, anger itself is not a sin, but if you get to the point of losing control, kind of like drinking too much, you drink to the point to where you lose control. The same thing can happen with anger, which is a deadly sin. The thing that I realized, this just happened for me, because I do have a tendency to be able to really rage if I want to. And I think we all do, right? But for me, it's particularly difficult at times. And so I really like smashing things, inanimate things. I've never hurt anybody, but I've always liked punching holes in things, destroying things, even if they're things that I own that I should be taking care of. I will just, if I'm angry enough, it's like, okay, that thing is going to be broken. And if you have a problem with anger like that, like I do, perhaps it's my hot Italian blood. What I did recently was, instead of actually carrying out those acts of destruction, I just thought about it. I imagined it. And it was actually, I don't know if I would call it better. It was okay. But but I just imagined, a baseball bat, which I didn't have. and just completely destroying everything around me. And then, that was a very short little mental exercise, and the anger passed. I was able to weather that storm without actually manifesting that in reality. And that is, for me, one step back, and that's a big thing that I've conquered recently. It's one of my weaknesses, right? And the funny thing is people don't upset me. People say all kinds of horrible things to me, and I'm just kind of like, whatever. It's actually inanimate objects that make me the most angry. If I injure myself, I don't know what it is about the inanimate object, or if things just aren't going my way, right? And that's part of that attachment to the idea that my will should be done rather than God's will. And that's why I suggested before, like, if you hurt yourself or injure yourself, and this is what I used to do and I've started doing it again, is I say, Lord, thank you for the pain. I deserve that. And so I think we're getting there. I hope I gave you some good concrete examples. Please leave comments in the comments section about some ideas you have about how to conquer certain sins. What are the action plans we can put in place when we firmly resolve in confession that we are no longer going to commit these sins? And next episode, we are going to be doing another viewer request episode. So please be looking for that one. This has been Catholic Hawk 45. We will see you next time.